It was a crisp autumn morning in the small town of Willow Creek. The streets were lined with maple trees, their leaves golden and fiery red. In the Dawson household, anticipation hung in the air like perfume. Today was Emily Dawson's wedding day. Friends and family gathered early, chattering excitedly, unaware that this day would soon turn into a nightmare. Emily, 27, was known for her radiant smile, her infectious laughter, and her meticulous attention to detail. She had spent months planning the perfect wedding, selecting every flower, every song, every seat arrangement. Her fiancé, Daniel Reynolds, 29, a software engineer with a quiet, steadfast demeanor, had been waiting at the church with the groomsmen. Guests murmured as the clock ticked past the ceremony's scheduled start. The flower girls fidgeted. The bridesmaids whispered nervously. And then it became clear. Emily was missing. At first, the thought seemed impossible. Maybe she had gotten cold feet. Perhaps she had taken a moment to breathe. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, panic began to settle like a shadow. Emily's disappearance was reported to the Willow Creek Police Department at 2:45 p.m. Her car had been found abandoned near Hawthorne Woods, a small forested area a few miles from town. Inside were her belongings, purse, shoes, and her phone. Detective Mark Hensley, a seasoned officer with over 15 years of experience, led the search. It was clear from the start, he later recalled, this wasn't a case of a runaway bride. The scene was too orderly. She didn't leave voluntarily. Volunteers joined in, combing the woods, walking the trails calling her name, shining flashlights into the undergrowth. Drones hovered overhead. Posters with Emily's smiling face were stapled to every telephone pole, every corner store. But as the hours turned to days, no trace of her was found. Rumors began to circulate. Some whispered that Emily had been kidnapped. Others suggested foul play. The town, usually quiet and serene, was gripped by fear. 3 months passed. The search efforts dwindled. Hope, that fragile, flickering flame, began to fade. Then, news came that seemed to confirm the worst. A woman's body had been found in a river 2 counties over. Though the coroner could not positively identify the body, due to its state of decomposition, her clothing, a long white gown, heavily damaged, matched what Emily had been wearing on her wedding day. The Dawson family, overwhelmed with grief, agreed to proceed with the funeral. The church was decorated with lilies, roses, and white ribbons. Family and friends arrived, solemn and tearful. Daniel, pale and hollow-eyed, walked in as if he were already a ghost. The casket, draped in white, sat at the center. Candles flickered softly, casting elongated shadows across the pews. It was supposed to be the last farewell. And then it happened. The heavy oak doors of the church creaked open. At first, the sound was mistaken for someone late to service. But when a figure stepped inside, the murmurs grew into gasps. Emily Dawson. She stood at the entrance, disheveled, wearing a tattered hoodie and jeans, her face pale but unmistakably alive. The congregation froze. Mothers clutched their children. Friends fell to their knees. Daniel stumbled forward, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Her mother, Margaret Dawson, screamed, "Emily, is it really you?" "I'm here," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm alive. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to come back before." For a long moment, the only sound was the sobbing of those who had mourned her. Emily's story was shocking, chilling, and in many ways miraculous. On the morning of her wedding, she had been abducted by a stranger, a man unknown to her and anyone she knew, forced her into a van and drove her across state lines to a remote cabin deep in the woods. For weeks, she lived in captivity. She described being blindfolded for much of the time, fed minimal rations, and threatened whenever she tried to escape. "I thought I would never see anyone again," Emily recounted to detectives. "I thought my life was over." The breakthrough came when her captor made a critical mistake. He left the cabin door unlocked one evening. Emily ran. Barefoot, exhausted, and terrified, she traveled through forests, back roads, and abandoned trails. She scavenged for food and water, evading cars and people who could not know she needed help. By the time she reached a police station in a neighboring town, she had survived on sheer willpower and determination. The body discovered in the river initially thought to be Emily, was later confirmed to be another woman, Lisa Harmon, a local who had been reported missing weeks earlier. The misidentification occurred because the gown she wore was similar to Emily's wedding dress, and her remains were severely decomposed. The news sparked outrage and disbelief. How could authorities declare someone dead without conclusive evidence? Questions arose about the investigation, the rush to close missing persons cases, and the errors that nearly buried Emily's life before she had a chance to live it fully. Detective Hensley immediately reopened Emily's case. Evidence was collected from the cabin, and forensic teams worked tirelessly. Surveillance footage from nearby towns, witness statements, and traffic cameras helped police piece together her captor's movements. Weeks later, David Keaton, a 42-year-old man with a history of violent offenses, was arrested. His cabin held numerous items linked to Emily, confirming her story. Charges included kidnapping, unlawful confinement, and multiple other felonies. Emily's survival and testimony were pivotal. Her bravery and resilience ensured that justice would be served, even if her ordeal would leave lasting scars. Returning home, Emily was enveloped by her family's love. Daniel, who had remained faithful through the darkest hours, finally held her in his arms. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers were amazed by the miracle. The bride who had vanished had returned to walk among the living. The church, once a place of mourning, became a symbol of hope. Emily's funeral transformed into a celebration of life, an event she never expected to attend for herself. Yet, despite the joy, Emily carried the weight of trauma. Therapy, counseling, and careful rebuilding of trust became a necessary part of her recovery. Though her life would never be the same, she emerged stronger, determined to reclaim her narrative. The story of Emily Dawson is a haunting reminder of how fragile life can be, and how resilient the human spirit is. It speaks to the dangers that can lurk even in ordinary lives, the mistakes that authorities sometimes make, and the miracles that can occur when determination refuses to die. On that day, in a church filled with grief, a missing bride walked into her own funeral, alive, courageous, and unbroken. Her story continues to serve as a cautionary tale, a testimony of survival, and an enduring legend in Willow Creek.